The song style. 2-3 clave is the same beat, just backwards. And then we have the rumba clave, which displaces the last beat, which goes for the 2-3 variety. Now, the reason I want to talk about this rhythm is because I think it's not only one of the most important rhythms in the history of percussion and drums, but also one of the most transient rhythms, and you find it in all sorts of music. So, we'll start with Latin music because that's where those rhythms come from, Africa, and then through the Caribbean, through the slave trade, and up into America. So, bossa nova is basically a pattern which is based off of this clave system. Right there, I was combining the son clave and the rumba clave. Same thing with the cascara. So that's based on the bell pattern, but still based off of this 3-2 clave pattern that I'm playing. Do the same thing off of 6-8, which is a little more difficult. There's a few different ways that people feel this, and the way I like to feel this. That works is you're spreading out the 3-2 over 2 separate bars of 6. So the first 3 falls in the first bar of 6, the 2 falls in the second bar of 6. A lot of people play it like a... bit of a wider beat, a little more space for other musicians to play. Usually when you're playing Latin music too, you have a lot of either conguero or some sort of other percussion going on, claves or... Now, basically after all these patterns came to America through the Caribbean, they came up with the slave trade into the United States through one of the main ports was New Orleans. And a huge part of New Orleans music is something called second line, which in my opinion, which some people disagree, but is based off of the clave as well, which is there's lots of other different things that you do in there. You're always playing around with the rhythm. You never just want to play, But that's basically, in my opinion, the basis of second line music, or vice versa. So that being a 2-3 instead of a 3-2 clave. Now, a lot of the people who are checking this out, a lot of the funk drummers, a lot of the other people in jazz music and Latin music, Mike Clark, go back to the paradiddle thing. A lot of it becomes less obvious in its roots in the clave, but it's still there. And an example from New Orleans, another example from New Orleans is Sissy Strut by Zig Boom Liste, which is like... give or take, whatever expression you want there. But to me, when I hear that, I hear still... but still there's there's all this clave based stuff going on. So a lot of these other people started taking these beats, developing other ways to play them around the kit in different ways. Some of the other ways that I showed, like cascaras. And again, all of these are fairly Americanized terms and versions for boxing in things that are never really put in boxes in the first place. All these things were taught through word of mouth and through spending time with and expert conguero and learning what these patterns sounded like. Now, a lot of people who are checking this stuff out, it goes back across the ocean to England and other places like that where rock and roll started coming about, which was obviously from America, but a big rock and roll drummer, John Bonham, I feel like used a lot of these clave ideas as well. When the Levy Breaks kind of has that sort of feel, but it's not really the same thing, but Poor Tom has that sort of thing. Like an adaptation of the second line thing, as well as making it heavier, more bass drum, fatter beat, adding the backbeat in there, and doing his own thing with it. He wasn't trying to rip it off, but it's a huge influence of him. He was super into Zigaboo Modaliste and the Meters, as well as a lot of those other jazz drummers from that era, Max Roach and all those guys. And a lot of his solos are actually based on those guys' solos as well. But then we get into a lot more modern music, where this is still, in my opinion, one of the, I can't turn on the radio without hearing a clave and some sort of music, so like hip-hop music. Again, all clave-based music, right? A lot of these things that you hear a lot of modern drummers doing that seem like they're more syncopated and more confusing than they are, when you're really, it goes back to thinking of the 6/8 over the 4/4 as well. Instead of thinking just 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thinking of this clave as more of a rhythmic device as opposed to something that, somebody sits there and it always sounds good when someone's doing that, but you can really spread it around the kit and do endless things with it. And these are things that, like, I see Chris Dave doing that type of stuff all the time too. Backwards versions of the clave still, taking it and doing as many different things as you can with it. But if you haven't already taken the time to explore that and check it out, I would highly recommend taking some time to play them around the kit and play them on different instruments too, whether you're a guitar player or bass player too, whatever it is. They're just, in my opinion, one of the most important rhythms.